General Hospital will reveal Lulu had always been seen as a symbol of sacrifice and empathy, but in recent days, she had become more withdrawn and calculating than ever before. She spent more and more time with her laptop, locking her door and reacting nervously whenever someone got close. Rocco noticed the change. It wasn't childish curiosity that stirred inside him, it was a gnawing unease, the quiet understanding that something important was being kept from him right under his own roof. One afternoon, Lulu abruptly left the room to answer an urgent phone call, leaving her laptop open on the desk. That was the moment fate took hold of Rocco. Danny, his close friend, happened to be visiting at the time. Their eyes fell instinctively on the unlocked screen. At first, there was hesitation, then an unspoken urge, and finally, a single decisive click. The files that opened revealed long notes, documents, and personal logs, poorly protected. Among them, one folder stood out, titled simply, "Never Tell Dante." Both boys held their breath as they opened it. The words that followed were a quiet confession from Lulu. It told the story of a child born during Brooke Lynn's teenage years, a baby boy hidden away from his biological father, none other than Dante. Months ago, during a chance conversation with Lois, Lulu had stumbled upon the truth. But instead of telling the man she once loved, she had chosen to remain silent. Terrified that revealing this child's existence would only draw Dante and Brooke Lynn closer. In that moment, Lulu wasn't a mother. She was a woman desperately trying to hold on to the last fragile threads of a love she had already lost. Rocco couldn't believe what he was reading. His world constricted under an invisible weight. A half-brother, someone he never knew existed. Someone whose name he hadn't even heard. The betrayal didn't come from his father, or even from Brooke Lynn. It came from the one person he had trusted most, his mother. Danny, always sharper and more composed, tried to remain calm as he watched his friend's internal storm build. He understood one thing clearly, keeping quiet would be a mistake. But exposing the truth might be a betrayal of a different kind. The two boys, with hearts still untouched by the armor of adulthood, now faced a choice that carried weight far beyond their years. The deeper they read, the more disturbing the revelations became. There were passages where Lulu poured out her jealousy at seeing Brooke Lynn happy around Dante. Her fear of losing what little remained between them. She didn't hate the child, she couldn't, but she couldn't suppress the envy either. So she buried the truth, telling herself it was for the best. Convincing herself that silence preserved balance, even if that balance was built on lies. As the door creaked open behind them and Lulu's footsteps approached, Rocco and Danny barely managed to shut the screen. But Rocco's heart had already shifted forever. He was no longer just a boy who laughed easily and trusted blindly. He had stepped into another world, a world where truths didn't always save people, and love wasn't always the reason people told the truth. That night, Rocco sat alone by the window, watching the streetlights shimmer against the glass like flickering fragments of memory. He knew it was only a matter of time before the truth surfaced, not from Lulu, but from him. The only question that remained was, when Dante learned everything, would he blame Lulu? Or would he seek out the child he never knew with an open heart? And would Brooke Lynn, after all these years of carrying this pain in silence, be willing to let the past rewrite her present? In Rocco's mind, nothing was certain. But there was one truth he understood more clearly than ever before: every secret comes with a price. And perhaps, that price was finally coming due. The following days passed in an eerie silence that seemed to echo louder than any confrontation ever could. Rocco carried the weight of what he knew like a stone in his chest, its pressure growing heavier with each passing hour. He moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding Lulu's gaze, his every glance laced with unspoken betrayal. Danny, sensing the growing burden on his friend, urged him to speak to Dante, to give the truth the chance to breathe. But Rocco hesitated. He knew that once the words left his mouth, there would be no turning back. The family he knew would fracture, and nothing, not even love, could guarantee it would mend the same way. Then came the moment. It wasn't planned. There was no dramatic setting, no breaking point. It was simply a quiet afternoon in the backyard. Dante, seated at the edge of the porch, looked up from his phone as Rocco approached with hesitant steps. The silence between father and son was both familiar and new, comfortable, but charged with the electricity of something impending. Rocco sat beside him, and though his lips never moved to form the confession, the look in his eyes was louder than any scream. Dante asked nothing. He didn't have to. Rocco simply placed the flash drive, copied from Lulu's files, into his father's hand and walked away. Dante's confusion was immediate, but it dissolved the moment he opened the files. He read the notes with growing disbelief, each line unraveling a past he never knew he had. Brooklyn. A child. A secret carefully, selfishly buried by someone he once trusted above all. His heart wavered between shock, betrayal, and something deeper, a primal ache for a connection lost before it could begin. He reread the notes several times, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes could no longer deny. The child existed. A boy. His son. A life he had been cut off from not by fate or death, but by a deliberate decision made in the name of love twisted by fear. He didn't confront Lulu that night. Instead, he sat in his car, parked in the shadows outside Brooklyn's apartment, staring at the faint glow of light behind her curtains. So many memories flooded his mind, moments from a youth marked by recklessness and fire. He had never thought of those days as ones that could give birth to something so permanent. He had assumed their mistakes had faded like the past always promised to. But the past had a heartbeat now. One that pulsed through the veins of a child he had never held, never named, never known. Brooklyn, when she opened the door to find Dante standing there, said nothing at first. Her face, usually so composed, collapsed into a fragile silence that betrayed everything. She knew. She had always known that this day would come. She stepped aside wordlessly, and he entered. The conversation that followed wasn't one of blame or rage. It was one of quiet devastation. Brooklyn explained it all, the fear of disrupting his life, the judgment from her family. The decision to keep the child's existence a secret because she didn't believe Dante would want to be part of something so complicated. But beneath every explanation lay the truth. She hadn't given him the chance to choose. She had decided for him. Dante didn't scream. He didn't accuse. He simply asked, "Where is he?" Brooklyn hesitated, then handed him a photo from a nearby drawer, a candid shot of a boy with his dark eyes and her stubborn mouth, laughing on a school playground. The name came quietly, Aiden. Dante stared at the picture for a long time, and in that moment, he realized that fatherhood wasn't a title given at birth, it was earned through action, presence, and love. And now he had to find a way to offer all three to someone who didn't even know he existed. Back at home, Lulu sensed the storm before it arrived. Dante didn't return that night, nor the next. When he finally came back, his silence said more than any argument. She tried to explain herself, to justify her silence, but her words scattered in the face of his heartbreak. He didn't shout. He simply looked at her and asked how long she thought she could protect him from his own life. Lulu broke down in that moment, not because she was caught, but because she knew she had lost something she could never reclaim, his trust. In the days that followed, Dante began the delicate, painful process of reaching out to the son he had never known. Aiden, wary and guarded, didn't immediately embrace this man who claimed to be his father. But Dante showed up. Again and again. At school functions, on weekends, quietly and without fanfare. Never forcing affection but always offering presence. Slowly, the wall between them began to crack. For Rocco, the revelation reshaped his world, but also expanded it. He wasn't the only child anymore, but he wasn't alone in that knowledge. He found something unexpected in Aiden, a mirror of his own confusion, anger, and curiosity. What began as hesitation became brotherhood, rooted not in shared blood alone, but in the shared reality of fractured truths. As for Lulu, her place in this newly forming family stood on unsteady ground. Her intentions, however misguided, had been driven by love. But love, she realized too late, was not an excuse to steal someone else's truth. She watched from a distance as Dante stood between two suns, one raised in the light, the other hidden in the shadow, and offered them both a future with open arms. The past, though filled with regret, had lost its power to dictate the course of what came next. Aiden was no longer a secret. He was a son. A brother. A boy whose presence would forever change the rhythm of every heartbeat in their broken, healing family. Aiden's world had always been one of structure and silence. Raised by Brooke Lynn with unwavering dedication but without answers to the questions that haunted his quiet moments. He had learned to keep his emotions buried beneath a mask of politeness. He was used to being the well-behaved child. The one who didn't ask why he didn't have a father at his school plays or why his mother turned distant every time he mentioned families with two parents. But all of that began to unravel the moment a man named Dante appeared, not as a stranger, but as a presence too familiar to ignore. Their first meetings were brief and uncomfortable. Aiden had been told only that this man was a friend of the family, and Brooke Lynn, usually so confident, seemed nervous every time Dante was around. But Aiden noticed everything, the way Dante looked at him with awe and guilt tangled in one gaze, the way he lingered in doorways, never quite crossing the threshold unless invited. He sensed that this was not some distant acquaintance, and when the truth was finally revealed, it came not as a shock, but a confirmation of everything his instincts had already pieced together. Learning that Dante was his father didn't make Aiden angry. It made him numb. He had lived so long with the feeling that something was missing, that he had shaped his entire identity around the void. Now that void had a name and a face, and it stood before him, asking for a chance to begin again. Aiden didn't know how to respond. He didn't reject Dante, but he didn't embrace him either. He simply observed, watched how Dante smiled through the discomfort, how he listened without pushing, how he stayed, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Meanwhile, Brooke Lynn was caught in a storm of her own making. She had spent years shielding Aiden from the world she feared would hurt him, convinced that secrets were a form of protection. Now, she watched as the son she had raised with singular devotion began to drift toward a man she had once tried to forget. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, relief that Dante was willing to step up, fear that she would lose the closeness she had forged with Aiden, and shame for denying them both the truth for so long. It didn't help that the Quartermain household erupted in chaos when the news reached them. Lois, already critical of Brooke Lynn's decisions, felt personally betrayed. She accused her daughter of repeating the same patterns, secrecy, pride, and control, that had fractured their relationship years before. Brooke Lynn, for once, didn't defend herself. She listened, because deep down, she knew Lois was right. This wasn't just about Dante or Aiden. It was about years of running from responsibility, masking pain with performance, and trying to rewrite her mistakes through silence. The Quartermains, with all their dysfunction and legacy of scandal, had mixed reactions. Tracy saw the situation as yet another proof of Brooke Lynn's lack of judgment, while Ned struggled to balance disappointment with empathy. Monica offered the only consistent grace, reminding everyone that no family was without its buried truths, and that what mattered now was how they chose to move forward. As for Rocco, he found himself torn between pride and uncertainty. Meeting Aiden had unsettled him, not out of jealousy, but from a sense of displacement. He had always believed he knew where he stood in his father's heart. Now, that certainty wavered. But as the days passed, Rocco discovered a strange kinship in Aiden. They were both sons of the same man, both thrust into a reality neither had asked for. And in their late-night talks and awkward interactions, a bond slowly took root, one not born of shared childhood memories, but of mutual understanding. Brooklyn began to change, too. She no longer hid behind sarcasm or defensiveness. She sat with Aiden and listened when he asked why she kept his father a secret. She told him the truth, not the polished version, but the messy, painful one. Aiden didn't cry. He simply nodded, as if finally allowed to exhale. He began to call Dante by name, and eventually, by Dad, not out of obligation but out of earned affection. One weekend, they visited a quiet park near Dante's neighborhood. It wasn't dramatic or extraordinary. But in that afternoon, watching Dante teach Aiden how to throw a baseball while Brooklyn and Rocco cheered from a nearby bench, something fundamental shifted. It wasn't a perfect family. It wasn't even a whole one. But it was real. And as the sun dipped low over the trees, casting long shadows across the grass, Aiden stood between his parents, a boy once hidden now fully seen. The legacy of silence was ending. In its place, something fragile but hopeful had begun to grow. A family, born not of flawless choices, but of second chances and the quiet courage it took to finally tell the truth.